And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Thank you all for joining us. You know, we sit here and we start the Dr. King holiday with a few thoughts. The government is still shut down. The libs, no matter what the president says or does, they're in a death spiral, a death match, if you will. And you don't have to be fighting a cold like me. And by the way, I am so impressed with the people that work outside or that go outside and all of a sudden maybe they work at a window or they work in the warehouse and they have to go outside. I'm so impressed with those people that work in the elements because obviously my immune system can't handle a simple winter cold. And think about this today when we're when we're looking at the world that we live in at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Look at the world we live in today. We've had a very mild winter. A mild winter. And I'm getting pummeled by this goofy cold. And the challenging part for me is that when we take a look at this cold and everything else, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what happens if we had the severe weather, severe winter, which we had a couple years ago? That doesn't seem to be the case. So we're battling that. We're living the dream, and we're so blessed to have you with us. Now, you know, over the weekend, the president, we could talk about the president. We will. We could talk about the State of the Union. By the way, so many people have been calling me and emailing me here at the Broadcast Center about a State of the Union party. And I'm all in favor of having a State of the Union party and pumping up the president and saying that we support the president and everything else. The only problem is I don't know if we're going to have a State of the Union, right? A State of the Union. I don't know if we're going to have a State of the Union. If we do, I would love for us to be a Dave & Buster's. We can start promoting that. Dave & Buster's wants us back. We are ready to roll on that one. And the only problem is I don't know if we're going to have a State of the Union. So we will try and take a look at what we're going to do. You have one person, one senator saying, you can have the State of the Union in my state if the Congress won't let you in. It's really rather silly, this government shutdown, and real people with real lives are starting to get hurt. We're not going to sit back and say, oh, these guys are bad, this is horrible, the government workers are evil. We don't do that here. And you have people that are dependent on the government who all of a sudden, it doesn't look like it's going to, be a good thing for them. So we'll focus in on that. But one thing I want to say, and this is a public service announcement, and I know it's a little too early, I think, for this time of year for the deer to be coming back, but the deer, they're coming back, and you're going to love this. On my way into work, and if you're listening somewhere else, on the KIDO Talk Radio app, maybe you're like my mom and you tune in the great state of New Hampshire, maybe you're in Pennsylvania or some of the other places that we've had the privilege of working. This is very unique to Idaho. And Ray Amaya, as a person that lives in Boise, you can really appreciate this. So I'm sitting at a stoplight on Broadway, just kind of chilling out right by St. Luke's, and I look to my left, and there's a deer running down the highway. Now, again, people here don't think that's a big deal because they see that all the time. But I'm sitting there going, where else in America are you just going to see? Now, we see deer all the time crossing the road. And one of the great things about living in the Treasure Valley is that we, the ducks cross the road. And people stop for the ducks, and not just the ducks and the little ducklings, but the geese and such, and the obnoxious geese. I get that. But I'm sitting there, where else in America, maybe in Wyoming, could you see a full buck, if you will, I guess that's what they call him, just rolling down the highway, minding his own business, doing his own thing? And I'm going to myself, wow, amazing. And I'm sure that the cars that were traveling behind him were a little upset that the deer didn't have any rear lights or anything. It was just crazy. Speaking of crazy, over the weekend, they had the Women's March in the city of Boise. They had the Women's March where they're saying, oh, life is horrible. By the way, with the Women's March, according to the news reports, they want to get rid of the word women's. right? So how they're going to do this is they're going to get rid of the MEN and put an X in men. So it's MXN. So there's no men involved and there's no gender involved in women. And I believe we'll work on getting the sound for you in a minute. Jennifer Palmieri was in town. And you go, who's Jennifer Palmieri? Jennifer Palmieri is someone who worked for John Edwards, Hillary Clinton, and talking about women and how women this, women that. And I thought to myself about this Women's March and how unfair life is to women. And here you have Jennifer Palmieri, who was working with Hillary Clinton. And people can say that the election was stolen and everything else. But one of the things that gets me is Hillary Clinton should have to turn in her female card. And it has nothing to do with gender. Hillary Clinton did everything she could to fix the primary system, right? Poor little Bernie. Bernie did his very best, and we found out it was rigged. Hillary Clinton did everything she could, and yet here we have a person that worked for Hillary Clinton right there, yapping about how unfair it was. Third annual Women's March. By the way, I still don't believe that this is organized by high school kids. I don't. Number one. Number two, the idea that you're going to spell women, WOMXN, is preposterous. We hate men. Men are horrible. Do you think that the people that were responsible for the suffrage movement, the women's suffrage movement, hated men? And just this indoctrination that continues. I was outed by Tea Party Bob for leaving you and going to Hawaii. At Pearl Harbor. And I'm thinking Pearl Harbor is going to be very great. When I saw Pearl Harbor, I saw a bunch of people from Japan or China. I saw some Americans. And I had the park ranger rail about the government shutdown. And then I had the park ranger, in her infinite wisdom, try and tell everybody that we put everyone, and I'm not kidding here, in concentration camps. America did not put people in concentration camps. And those of you that have been around a Holocaust survivor or have been to the Holocaust Museum or understand history, understand the difference between an internment camp, which I'm not endorsing, I'm not condoning, and a Holocaust camp, a concentration camp. So the Women's March, they've had it with men. And here you have Jennifer Palmieri up there in Idaho. And I'm thinking, when's she ever been to Idaho? I remember Jennifer Palmieri when she was working the John Edwards campaign. Again, a misogynist that had issues with women. Remember John Edwards? I love my wife Elizabeth. And yet he had a mistress who had a baby out of wedlock. And he spent the whole time trying to hide his mistress and their shenanigans. And this is crazy. And this is happening here in the Treasure Valley where we have the Women's March. And no, you're going to, and I'm looking at the Channel 7 website, and women is spelled with MXN. What is that about? When does the news media capitulate to the demands of the activists? And I'm going to, a case in point. So the Women's March can come on. They can say anything. They give a little attention to the right to life. And then we have this incident in Washington, which we'll get to in a minute. But let's check out the reporting here from the Women's March. By the way, you're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM with Kevin Miller in the morning. Let's take a listen.
A sea of people.
Our feelings are human emotions, and our bodies are human.
Holding signs and speaking out flooded the Capitol steps Saturday with one message: women's rights.
This event is just really about empowerment and celebration and recognition of all women.
What I have seen in the last 2 years is women getting involved in politics, starting new organizations.
Sure, there's Jennifer Palmieri. Now, imagine, and I know a lot of you have said this, Kevin Miller, we need to do a State of the Union party. Done, we'll do it. Number two, maybe it's time for a men's march. Well, what are we celebrating? The oppression of everybody else? No. But if people don't champion men, with no disrespect to women, but this whole gender-specific, racial-specific, I wonder what Dr. King would think of all this today. And, we've got more women in Congress, more this and that. Does that necessarily mean that having less men is a good thing? But it's crazy. I apologize for interrupting. Let's hear the rest of the report from Channel 7.
Changing the way that they engage in the world. It's really inspiring.
From Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., and even around the world, men and women marched for the third annual Women's March.
This is such a great opportunity to do two things. One is to just celebrate women and what we all do individually and collectively. And the other is to really bring voice to the fact that we've still got a long way to go.
Brian McKay was among the crowd with his daughter.
We basically need to see our country return to being empowering to women, kinder, gentler. And it's encouraging to see everything that's going on. And
who's this guy? We need our country to be more empowering to women. I think women have the most amount of power now that they've ever had, and rightfully so. Look at the two Ada County commissioners, out with the old guys, in with two Democrats that happen to be women. Right? And I suppose we should celebrate that. The end of men. Let's bring on the ladies. Let's get rid of all the male-dominated superheroes and turn them into women. Turn them into people that are politically correct. But back to this third annual Women's March, I don't know what it really accomplishes except to lay the smackdown on the men. And this guy, last week it was Gillette, a best a man can do. You don't think that females bully? That women bully? More so than men? I just can't think you can pick one gender over another. And we go back to Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was going to destroy the glass ceiling. She had everything going, and she lost to a man. But she's gotten a pass on the bleach bit when it comes to destroying her servers. She's gotten a pass on her emails. She's gotten a pass on Benghazi. She's gotten a pass on selling the uranium to China. Or, Russia.
in the U.S. right now.
But this year's Women's March was clouded with controversy. So much so that some cities like New Orleans canceled this year's march.
The leadership of the National Women's March organization is not only turning a blind eye to anti-Semitism, but is actually engaging in anti-Semitism themselves.
Mary Strau is the communications director for the state Republican Party. She has a message for those who align themselves with the national group.
It's not okay to turn a blind eye to anti-Semitism. Just because you may agree with part of their platform, you can't ignore the anti-Semitism.
See, what Mary's talking about is during The View, Meghan McCain asked the president of the National Organization of Women, I believe, asked her, do you condemn the comments of Minister Farrakhan? Do you condemn the comments of Minister Farrakhan? And she fumbled and bumbled and went on, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, the networks, get this, gave the Women's March 15 times more attention than the March for Life. Because, look, we're marching for women. What's the March of Life? You're just marching for the unborn, right? Now, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying that's how they view it. At 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So getting back to this, so Meghan McCain brilliantly asks her, hey, do you condemn, because this is the Me Too movement, the comments of anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan? Well, no, I don't. I don't use those words. So it costs them sponsors and everything else. That's the controversy that they're alluding to in the Channel 7 report. And, again, people can dish it out and they can't take it. My point is this really necessary? Maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to hear from you on this. You can hear the numerous shout-outs I'm doing. But, is this really necessary in the city of Boise?
But organizers here in Boise say the two aren't connected.
People for Unity is putting on the Women's March on Idaho, and we are not affiliated with the National Women's March at all.
I think when women turned out to march in 2017 and 2018 and today, they're not doing it because a particular organization asked them to. They're doing it to represent themselves.
As for Brian, he hopes the Women's March on Idaho will continue marching toward a better future, not only for his daughter, but for her generation.
Keep making progress.
See, so I'm looking at this guy's sign, and it says, boys will be boys, men that respect women don't build controversy or something, and he's got boys like crossed out. Now, have we crossed a threshold? By the way, most of the folks that committed these crimes against women, they were liberals. Harvey Weinstein, liberal. Les Moonves, liberal. Kevin Spacey, well, he did it against the boys, allegedly. Liberal. right? So the idea that we're going to tar and feather men all the time is just crazy. Coming up next, a controversy in Washington, D.C. You heard about this, where a group of Catholic boys allegedly harassed a Native American who just wanted to play his instrument. However, unlike the liberal media, there's more to the story. We'll talk about it next. By the way, celebrating a world without colors, celebrating a world without race, the Dr. King holiday. What would Dr. King think of today? 580-5436. What would he think of America today? Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And blessed to be with you, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Our time is 624, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Now, there's been a big controversy over the weekend involving a group of Catholic young men and a Native American Vietnam veteran in Washington, D.C. And you've had people condemning the Catholic young men because they're wearing a Make America Great hat again. You know, the kind that Donald Trump wears and continues to wear and should wear. And then you have everybody condemning the racism in America. It's Dr. King Day. I thought we would address it at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Now, coming up, the language in this report is something that we don't really hunker down to on KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller in the morning, but it tells the whole story. So we'll get to that in a minute. First, let's get you to work safely and on time, or maybe you're...
I'm just Channel 7's Eric Everett.
So let's get to it. Apparently, people condemned Nick Sandman from Covington Catholic High School because they were intimidating a Native American Vietnam veteran. What the media didn't know, and remember, if you go to journalism school, they always say get 2, maybe 3 sources. Don't just take one side of the story unless you hate America and you hate Donald Trump. Now, again, I apologize for the vulgarity in this report, but it does set the tone here. So here's a chance if you have children listening, if you're yourself a child, you don't like the bad words, probably peace out for 10 seconds. Here, or a minute. Here we go.
This video shows what happened long before Philip shows up. You can see a group of about 5 black men who identify as Hebrew Israelites preaching. They start taunting people of all colors, other black visitors, natives, and a Catholic priest.
Let's make America great again. A bunch of child molesting.
This is the moment that group becomes aware of the students, some wearing Make America Great Again hats.
You got these pompous bastards come down here in the middle of a native rally with their dirty ass hat on.
At first, the Catholic school students are there in small numbers, but more and more students begin to gather, watching, with few weighing in. The small group of men continues taunting them.
A bunch of incest babies, right, trailer park babies. This is what Make America Great looks like.
And, you know, you go to Washington, D.C., you do see a lot of homeless people. You see a lot of mentally ill people. And you see a lot of people that are just trying to incite a riot. Now, to me, the Capitol Police should have been called if they weren't there already and arrested these guys because they're trying to incite a riot. Here you have a group of kids from a Catholic high school and anyone who's been involved in private education, and whether that's homeschooling, when we're talking time, effort, energy, or money, or sending kids to a private school, you understand there's a lot of money that goes into it. So they get the field trip to Washington, D.C., and there they are outside the Lincoln Memorial, and you have the black militants going at them, attacking everybody of all races. They're equal opportunity offenders. So what happens next? You have this Vietnam veteran that comes in, and apparently I think he was trying to calm the storm. I think that's the way the story goes. We'll get to that in a minute here at KIDO Talk Radio. But how it was portrayed is a young, bigoted, white, privileged kid in trying to intimidate a 63-year-old man. Well, first of all, if you've been to Vietnam, if you're 63 years old, if you're playing your drums in Washington, D.C., you're not intimidated by a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old. Age does something to you. You just don't get intimidated. But the media, once again, just like the Duke lacrosse case, looking for a way to make these, and I hate to say this on this Dr. King Day, white kids look evil. Let's listen to the rest of the report before we get to Doug.
The students begin to react, but do not approach the men. The black Israelites continue to condemn the kids.
You worship blasphemy. We got angels that are black for us.
Then, one of the students takes off his shirt and the group begins chanting. 2 minutes later, you hear a drum beat. That is Phillips and another Native American drummer. He says it was an attempt to thwart potential violence. The kids dance to it, and some begin chanting along with the native song. But for those who think they were enjoying each other's company, Phillips says that is not at all how it felt, especially because of the student standing before him.
Fear, not for myself, but fear for the next generations, fear where this country's going.
Right. So here we have the curse of social media. Before we had social media, before we had the people of Google, Facebook, Twitter ginning up the racial angst, we just used to do it on our own. And shame on these folks. Look, I understand that this young man, Nathan Phillips, this decorated Vietnam War veteran, Native American elder, was there, but the kid didn't do anything wrong. He's just looking at him. And what's he supposed to do? So the Phillips gets in his face, and he just sits there calmly, not doing anything. How about the black Israelites that were trying to incite a riot? Why weren't they arrested? Why weren't they arrested? Let's talk about it next. I'd love to explore the idea of race today, race in Idaho and race in our world. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin.
And don't forget, after Dave Ramsey, it is our friend Sean Hannity with the very latest. Coming up, more of your phone calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Let's go to Simon Owen in London, Fox News Radio, exclusively on 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. So, Simon, good morning.
Morning, Kevin.
So we've got a big economic forum in Davos and no President Trump.
No, indeed. And if you'd handed over $50,000, you could have got yourself a ticket to this extraordinarily high-powered networking and socializing week that takes place this time every year in Davos, Switzerland, up in the Swiss Alps. But President Trump will not be there. He was slated to attend, but he cancelled because of the government shutdown. And then there was still going to be a U.S. delegation there headed by Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. They, in the end, were also cancelled. The whole U.S. delegation was pulled back. So there is no U.S. government presence at this meeting. It's actually striking the number of political leaders who you might expect to be there, but who aren't. The British Prime Minister back in London dealing with problems with Brexit. The French president back at home facing waves of anti-government protests there. President Trump back in Washington trying to sort out the government shutdown. So there's a number of leaders who will be there. You know, the organisers saying they've still managed to pull a significant crowd of power players in the political stage, but it's also striking the number who are staying home.
Well, indeed, it seems that everybody has their own internal issues. So how important, how impactful will this be?
Well, I mean, you know, the organisers have said that they've still got a record 300 government ministers in attendance and nearly 60 heads of state or government, including the German Chancellor is going, the Japanese Prime Minister, the Italian Prime Minister. So that's 3 of the G7 group of really wealthy countries, and they've got about 3,000 attendees overall. So there's still people there, but it's not going to be the crowd puller in the sense of having President Trump delivering. That was the point when he went to Davos, was when he delivered and set out on the global stage what it meant for what America First meant for the rest of the world, his America First policies. In his absence, they do still have the Brazilian president going, brand new Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro, just taking charge of Latin America's largest economy. And he is another interesting character because he's the latest world leader to come to power, riding this wave of anti-establishment, often called populist sentiment. He's often described as far-right Bolsonaro. And his position on China's trade policies and also climate change, not dissimilar to President Trump at times as well. So he will still draw a crowd. And just one thing to say is that we've heard already today from the International Monetary Fund, which is using this event to update its growth forecasts for the world. And it's tapping into the kind of pessimism that we're hearing from Davos as this gets underway. And the IMF has just said that it's cutting its global growth forecast for this year down from 3.7%. It's now predicting 3.5% growth. And what is the biggest risk to that? They're talking about potential trade tensions.
Indeed. To be continued. Simon, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. And before we get to your phone calls, let's get a latest from Richard Jordan, Fox News Radio, with the Kentucky students versus the Native American activist.
Nick Sandman, a junior at Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky, says in an email that he was trying to calm the situation. Sandman was attending an anti-abortion rally near the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Friday while wearing a Make America Great Again hat. He says he and his classmates were confronted by a group yelling insults at the students. Sandman says the students then began yelling school spirit chants to drown out the other protesters. Video shows the teen staring and standing very close to a Native American elder who also says he was trying to ease the tensions by playing the drum. Sandman adds that he did not hear his fellow students say anything racist or hateful. Richard Jordan, Fox News.
Yet that doesn't stop folks from attacking the kid, guilty till proven innocent. Jim in Meridian with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
That park ranger you were talking about in Hawaii, was that on the USS Arizona?
It was right before you go out into the Arizona, yes. It was.
I think you ought to try to get that park ranger fired and maybe enlist the VFW and the American Legion and some other veterans organizations, with you. Just kind of write a memo of what you heard and, witnessed and everything about it, document it, and start the effort to get that individual fired. That's just slandering all Americans like that, really, in the war effort. This is what has happened with the PC, the politically correct side of this story, which has been changed so much. It's a revisionism of history since the 1990s. That relocation of the Japanese off the West Coast was absolutely necessary. It was a wartime emergency. We were in a two-front war and losing. Especially with the U-boats on the East Coast side, it had to be kept secret. The losses were so severe. The Japanese, there were over 40,000 enemy aliens. These were not Japanese American citizens. They always want to say American citizens. They were not citizens. Over 40,000 were Japanese enemy aliens, and unfortunately they were living around Navy bases for the most part, and ports and military targets. Washington, D.C. and FDR expected an invasion of that coast any day in December 41 and January, February 42, and the Japanese imperial government had the full means to do it. They had the largest fleet in the world. They had the means to launch an invasion on our coast. In fact, they had submarines. I think there were 10. I don't remember the exact number. They had a submarine force off our west coast, which shelled the coast, some refineries, and launched a plane one time that set a fire in Oregon, dropped a bomb in Oregon and set a fire. So this was real. This was war. And these people, 112,000 initially, were in a declared combat zone. They had to be removed, like any general would remove you if you were a citizen and ethnic of the enemy we'd just gone to war against because of Pearl Harbor. They had to be removed. It was done humanely.
And Jim, I think there were some comments there about just based on how they looked and hate and everything else. And then during the Pearl Harbor movie, it was explained that we cut off the Japanese from the oil, almost rationalizing that the Japanese had no choice but to attack us. And citizens of the world, and I'm going, are you bleeping kidding me? We're not citizens of the world here. It was amazing.
I would recommend a book for your listeners, and I'll send it to you if you want, Kevin, if you promise you'll read it and talk about it, that gives the true side of this story and what happened. It's called World War II Japanese Relocation Camps and the WRA. WRA stands for War Relocation Authority. So World War II Japanese Relocation Camps and the WRA, a prudent emergency wartime measure.
I'll look it up, Jim. You don't have to send it to me. I appreciate it, brother.
Okay, because there's a lot more to this story that, of course, is not taught in high school. And the camps, if Minidoka were still running and they let veterans move there, I would move there and live there right now. They had a post office. They had free health care, free food, dentist. They had a high school and a marching band. I would move there right now if I could. So,
sure.
Concentration camp just does not cut it. That's a lie.
It is. Jim, thank you. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. Tom Buds, TomBuds.com joins us now. Good morning, Tom.
Kevin, are you feeling okay, man? You sound like you got a little stuffies.
Oh, more than a little, my friend.
Well, I commend you for being on the radio this morning. Good job.
Look, I gotta justify my existence, Tom. There's no taking days off anymore. Please go ahead.
Oh, just do a GoFundMe. I'm sure people in Idaho would love to just be able to help. Have you have a day off. I was listening to Simon Owen. I think I had a question first though. Why do we always talk about the Fed and the IMF like they're somehow okay and part of our global economic success? I mean, anytime they meet, it's worse for the global economy, not better. And those are super national governing economic entities anyway that pull the strings for not only America's economy, but economies around the world. So as far as this racism thing, I'm so sick of hearing this. And I can't understand why either we just don't give it any credibility at all, or we're out there in mass just stifling this thing. And so I was thinking about this, and, the issues, I believe, began with brainwashing or changing people's minds. And I was thinking about what areas of our minds are molded. Who molds the minds of the people? Well, I'd argue that the media, like you said, social media, the school, and the government. Well, all right, if nobody can think of anything else besides that, then I would say that it might be evidence that proves that the government has initiated every race war that everybody has ever had. I mean, if you think about it, the schools and the media are, touting Cloward and Piven, Saul Alinsky, rules for revolution, specifically to collapse America while teaching subversive anti-American activities is somehow freedom of speech, when in the 70s the government had oversight bureaucracies that were to criminalize such activities. So how is it that raising your fist and preaching communism and socialism and all the newspapers that are in all our local libraries are somehow not subversive activities when they don't lead to keeping the peace? And after all, isn't law enforcement's job to keep the peace rather than advocate for revolution? And if that's true, then why in some of the bigger cities are they sitting on the side of the streets because of the mayor and allowing it to happen? And does it really just come about employment for them? And so the other part of that is today is MLK Day. Most people don't know that he had ties to the Communist Party, but we worship communists in America generally. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Mandela, Marx, Che Guevara, and we celebrate all of their principles. Time magazine writes articles about all of these communists and about how they were freedom fighters. The idea that America thinks it's free while celebrating a Martin Luther King Day shows exactly how lost America really is. And so I thought on this MLK Day, where everybody gets the day off, to sit and ponder.
Well, wait a minute now, Tom. Are you saying
research.
that we shouldn't be celebrating Dr. King Day?
I'm saying why should we celebrate Martin Luther King Day? You know what? He was considered the civil rights or human rights icon. Well, let's think about this for a minute. America wasn't built on human rights. It was built on God-given rights. When we talk about human rights, what he was doing was appealing to the government for government permission rather than claiming the rights of God. When you have the rights from God, you know that the rights and duties and the things that he has given to you are those things that can never be taken away from the government. But yet you have this alleged Christian man that sits there and says that, he's all about human rights, when it did nothing else but to be able to advance the struggle, which leads to communism and revolution.
You're saying the civil rights movement. You're saying the civil rights movement advanced communism?
Yes, it did.
Oh.
I believe yes, it did. And what it also did was it undermined the American form of government by advocating for government rights or government privileges rather than focusing on God-given rights. And so now, when we talk about human rights and we talk about, we've got human rights, now we've got women's rights, we've got gay rights, we've got dog rights, we've got cat rights, we've got every right that furthers the class the class struggle. And class struggle is directly related
All right,
to the Communist Revolution.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks. Have a good day. All right. Your reaction to Tom next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. So over the weekend, on Saturday, the president decided to give an offer to the libs, the Democrats, and much to the chagrin of the folks in the mainstream media, they had a problem with the president. They decided the president didn't do enough. Let's take a listen to what happened over the weekend. The Miller Morning Montage on KIDO Talk Radio.
If we all know that we want to do something about DACA, we all know that we immediately want to open up our government, then we know that the problem is border security. So let's sit down. Maybe we need a panel that both sides agree upon that would determine what the border security would look like, and then we move forward.
We really want to come to an agreement here. The president really wants to come to an agreement here. He has put offers on the table. The responsible thing for the Democrats to do is put a counteroffer on the table if you don't like this one.
Until this shutdown ends, we still have to protect our federal workers. If the shutdown's gone on for too long, the one person causing it is President Trump, and he can end it.
It's a good proposal, and we're going to put it on the floor this week in the Senate, and I sincerely hope that our colleagues from across the aisle will work with us on this. Let's get this passed. Let's end the shutdown as well as fund border security.
It's outrageous, and he's just playing politics, and this is a bad deal. It does not do the things that would move this country forward in a productive way.
Right, and that's Krista Gillibrand, the latest Democrat running for president. Look, the bottom line here is that nobody cares about the government workers. If you're a government worker right now, you're working for free, you've got to feel that your country has let you down. And people can talk about the president. He could have taken the deal. Well, he could have taken the deal a year ago when Schumer gave him $25 billion for the wall. And yes, I agree that there needs to be a wall. I'm not down with the amnesty. I'm not down with the DACAs, but I'm not running the country. And everybody has principle until it starts hitting them in the checkbook, right? That's really what it comes down to. If you're going to work today at the TSA Center in Boise, at the airport, and you're not getting a check, that impacts you. When all of a sudden you've got to run up the credit cards to pay for things, that impacts you. And it would be one thing if Nancy Pelosi and her staff, and Chuck Schumer and his staff, and Mitch McConnell and his staff weren't receiving paychecks. I give it to the president, Mike Pence. They are there. They're saying, okay, we're ready to negotiate. And yet the Democrats, they don't want to negotiate. They want to destroy America. And if they get their way on this, they will. We'll talk about it next. Kevin Miller, thank you for starting your day on the right side. KIDO Talk Radio, good morning.